Please, baby. Don't move.
The power went out at exactly 9:42 p.m. One moment Amara Ademi was crouched behind a wall of dead orchids, her arms wrapped around a trembling 7-year-old girl, and the next moment the entire mansion swallowed itself in darkness. Somewhere above them, boots pounded against marble. A man's voice barked orders in Korean, sharp and furious. Glass shattered. A woman screamed from the east wing. Amara pressed her palm over Yuna's mouth, not to silence her. The child hadn't spoken a single word in 18 months. But because her own heart was slamming so hard, she was afraid the sound alone would give them away. "Don't move," she whispered. "Please, baby, don't move." A flashlight beam swept across the broken greenhouse glass. Boots crunched closer. Amara felt Yuna's small fingers dig into her arm, and for one terrifying second she thought, this is how it ends. This is how a physical therapist from Ibadan dies in a stranger's garden, 12,000 kilometers from home, trying to protect a child who was never hers to protect. 6 months earlier, Amara hadn't even known this house existed. She'd known hospital corridors. She'd known the particular exhaustion of walking home at midnight from her third shift of the week, praying the Danfo would still be running. She'd known the sound of her father's voice slurring after the stroke, half of him gone quiet in a way that terrified her more than his silence ever should have. She'd known bills stacked on the kitchen table like a losing hand of cards, and her mother's face when she thought no one was watching her cry. What Amara had not known, what she could never have imagined, was that answering one strange recruitment email would place her, 6 months later, in the dark, hiding a billionaire's daughter from armed men, holding her breath so tightly it burned. But to understand how a pediatric therapist from Nigeria ended up here, in the black heart of a Seoul mansion with her life in her hands, you have to go back to the beginning. Back to an ordinary Tuesday when Amara was folding laundry and her phone buzzed with a message that would change everything. Confidential caregiving position, high compensation, immediate start, discretion required. She almost deleted it. It read like a scam, the kind of message she warned her younger cousins about. But then she saw the number at the bottom, a number with more zeros than she'd ever earned in 5 years of work combined, and she sat down hard on the edge of her bed. Her father needed surgery the insurance wouldn't cover. Her mother hadn't slept properly in months. Her little brother had stopped talking about university because there was no money for it anymore, and he'd started saying, "maybe next year," in a voice that broke something in Amara every time she heard it. She wrote back before she could talk herself out of it. The contract, when it arrived, was 30 pages long and stranger than anything she'd read in her life. She would surrender her phone during work hours. She could not leave the estate without written permission. She was forbidden, in bold, underlined text, from asking any staff member about the late Mrs. Choi. If she violated any clause, she would be terminated immediately and would forfeit her salary. The salary itself was obscene, 10 times what she made in a year at the clinic in Ibadan for 12 months of work. Her mother begged her not to go. "Something is wrong with this kind of money, Amara. Good things don't hide themselves behind so many rules." "Mama, we don't have a choice," Amara said, and hated how true it was. She signed the contract on a Thursday. She landed in Seoul the following Monday, jet-lagged and terrified, clutching a suitcase that held everything she owned that mattered. The Choi estate did not look like a home. It looked like a fortress built to resemble a 5-star hotel, white stone, black iron gates, security cameras mounted like unblinking eyes at every corner. A woman in a gray suit met her at the entrance and walked her through the halls without a single smile, reciting rules the way a soldier recites orders. Dozens of staff moved through the mansion like ghosts, eyes down, voices low. Amara noticed immediately that nobody laughed. Not once. Not anywhere. "How many caregivers have worked here before me?" Amara asked. The woman in the gray suit didn't look at her. "You are the 6th this year." What happened to the other 5? They left. Why? The woman finally turned, and for one flickering second, something like pity crossed her face. You'll understand soon enough. Amara understood within the hour. She was led to a wing of the house that felt colder than the rest, and there, sitting cross-legged on the floor of an otherwise empty playroom, was a little girl with her back to the door. She didn't turn around. She didn't react to footsteps. She simply sat, tearing a photograph into smaller and smaller pieces, her small hands moving with a kind of mechanical patience that made Amara's chest ache before she'd even seen the child's face. Yuna, the woman in the gray suit, said, "This is Miss Amara. She'll be looking after you now." Nothing, not a flinch, not a glance. Amara knelt slowly, keeping her distance, the way she'd been trained to approach frightened children in the clinic back home. "Hi, Yuna. My name is Amara. I'm going to be around for a while if that's okay with you." The girl kept tearing the photograph. Later that night, alone in the small staff room she'd been given, Amara opened the folder she'd been handed, Yuna's file, thin and clinical, stripped of anything that felt human. Selective mutism. Onset following house fire 18 months prior. Mother deceased in the same incident. Patient has not spoken since. That was all. No warmth in the words. No mention of what a 7-year-old carries in her body when the worst night of her life took her voice along with her mother. Amara closed the folder and stared at the ceiling for a long time before she finally slept. She learned quickly that the house had its own strange grammar of fear. The staff spoke to her in careful half-sentences, always glancing over their shoulders. Meals were served on schedule and cleared away in silence. And every evening at exactly 8:15, Yuna would walk, not run, not hesitate, just walk with the precision of a small soldier to a locked door at the end of the east corridor. She would stand before it for exactly 3 minutes, staring at the wood as if she could see through it. Then she would turn and walk away, and nobody, not one single person in that enormous house, could tell Amara why. "Don't ask about that door," a housekeeper warned her on the 3rd day. "Don't ask about the fire. Don't ask about the wife. If Mr. Choi hears you asking questions, you'll be on a plane home by morning." "I just want to help her," Amara said. The housekeeper's eyes softened, just barely. "Then help her without asking why. That's the only way anyone survives working here." Amara met Choi Jae-hoon for the first time 4 days after her arrival, and the meeting lasted less than 90 seconds. He entered the room like weather, sudden, absolute, changing the air pressure. Tall, immaculate, a man built entirely out of control. His employees straightened when he passed. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet, which somehow made it more frightening than shouting would have been. "You're the new one," he said, not quite a question. "Yes, sir, Amara Ademi." "The others left within 2 weeks." "I'm aware, sir." "Why do you think you'll be different?" Amara looked at him directly, which she would later learn almost no one in that house dared to do. "Because I'm not here to fix her, sir. I'm here to sit with her until she decides to trust someone. That takes longer than 2 weeks. Something flickered behind his eyes, surprise, maybe, or something older and sadder that he buried before she could name it. "You have 1 year," he said. "Don't waste it." Then he was gone, and Amara stood alone in the hallway, her hands shaking without her permission. It was 3 weeks before Amara discovered the secret about Jae-hoon that no file could have prepared her for. She'd woken before dawn, unable to sleep, and wandered toward the kitchen for water. She passed Yuna's room and stopped, because the door was cracked open and a shape moved inside, tall, familiar, kneeling beside the sleeping child's bed. It was Jae-hoon, the same man whose voice made grown employees flinch. He was sitting on the edge of his daughter's bed at 4 in the morning, gently, carefully, braiding her hair while she slept, his enormous hands moving with a tenderness that didn't match anything Amara had seen from him in daylight. When he finished, he pressed the softest kiss to the top of Yuna's head and whispered something in Korean that Amara couldn't understand but somehow felt anyway. Then he stood, smoothed his jacket, and left before the sun rose, before anyone else in the house would ever know he'd been there. Amara never told anyone what she saw, but she carried it with her, a small warm stone in her pocket, proof that somewhere beneath all that ice, a broken father was trying in the only hour he trusted himself to love his daughter. She decided that night that she wasn't going to force Yuna into therapy exercises. She wasn't going to make her talk. She was going to earn her trust the way you earn the trust of any wounded thing, slowly, patiently, without demanding anything in return. She started folding paper cranes and leaving them on the windowsill of the playroom. She painted alone in the garden, humming softly, never looking at Yuna, never asking her to join. She left small handwritten notes tucked into books, simple things, asterisk good morning. I hope you slept well, expecting no response and getting none. Until one Tuesday afternoon, she noticed one of her paper cranes was missing from the windowsill. The next morning, two new cranes sat beside the others, slightly clumsy, slightly crooked, made by small, uncertain hands. Amara had to leave the room so Yuna wouldn't see her cry. From that day, something shifted, slow as a tide coming in. Yuna began sitting closer during their quiet afternoons. She started leaving her bedroom door open a crack. She still didn't speak, not a single word, but she watched Amara now, really watched her, the way a person watches someone they're deciding whether to trust. Then, on a rainy Thursday, 6 weeks into the contract, it happened. They were sitting in the garden, sheltered under the veranda, watching the storm. Amara wasn't even looking at Yuna. She was humming an old Yoruba lullaby her own mother used to sing, half to herself, half to fill the silence. She felt it before she saw it, a small, cold hand sliding into hers. Amara went completely still, terrified that breathing wrong might break the moment. She looked down slowly. Yuna's fingers were wrapped around hers, her small face turned toward the rain, saying nothing, needing to say nothing. No words, just trust. Amara didn't move for 20 minutes. She would have sat there for 20 years. Word spread through the staff quietly. The housekeeper who'd warned her on the third day actually smiled at her in the hallway the next morning. But not everyone was pleased. There was a coldness from certain corners of the house Amara couldn't explain, glances that lingered too long, doors that closed a little too quickly when she approached. She should have paid closer attention to that. She would understand why later, when it nearly cost her everything. It was during that same storm, weeks after the hand-holding, that Amara made the discovery that cracked the house's silence wide open. Yuna had bolted from the veranda mid-afternoon, running through the rain toward the far end of the garden, and Amara had chased after her, soaked to the skin, calling her name uselessly. The girl couldn't answer even if she wanted to. She found her standing in front of a wall of ivy so thick it looked like part of the landscaping. Yuna pushed through a gap Amara hadn't even noticed, and Amara followed, ducking beneath vines, and stopped dead. A greenhouse, forgotten, glass fogged with years of neglect, thousands of orchids inside, every single one dead, brittle, brown, collapsed in their pots like something out of a dream nobody wanted to remember. Except one. One orchid near the back bloomed violet and alive, its soil dark and freshly watered. "Someone's been coming here," Amara whispered. Yuna walked to the flower and knelt beside it. Then she reached beneath the potting table and pulled out a small object Amara hadn't noticed, an old handheld recorder, its plastic casing yellowed with age. Amara's hands trembled as she pressed play. Static, then a woman's voice, warm and clear, singing a lullaby in Korean, soft as breath. Yuna dropped to her knees. Silent tears streamed down her face, her small shoulders shaking with sobs that made no sound at all, a child who had learned, somehow, even how to cry without noise. Amara pulled her into her arms and held her while the recording played through twice, and understood, without being told, that she was standing in a dead woman's sanctuary, a place someone had hidden, a place someone had kept secretly alive. But why hide a greenhouse? Why keep a dead woman's orchid watered in secret, in a house where everyone was forbidden to even speak her name? The strange things didn't stop there. If anything, they multiplied. Every night at exactly 2:17 a.m., Amara began hearing footsteps in the hallway outside her room, slow, deliberate, never explained. When she checked the security monitor in the staff office one evening out of curiosity, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. At 2:17 a.m. every night without exception, the hallway cameras cut to static for exactly 4 minutes before resuming. Fresh flowers kept appearing in the hidden greenhouse. Someone was still coming. And Yuna began drawing. Not her mother. Amara recognized Mrs. Choi's face from the one photograph she'd glimpsed in an old newspaper clipping. This was someone else. A woman with kind eyes and a long scar running across her wrist, drawn over and over in crayon. Dozens of pages of the same face, filling an entire sketchbook Amara found hidden beneath Yuna's mattress. "Who is this?" Amara asked gently, holding up one of the drawings. "Do you know her, sweetheart?" Yuna stared at the drawing for a long moment. Then slowly, she reached out and touched the scar on the paper woman's wrist. Just that. No answer. But it was the most direct response Amara had ever gotten, and it terrified her more than silence ever had. The final piece fell into place 3 days later, entirely by accident. Amara had been asked to reshelve books in the estate library, and while lifting an old atlas, a folded newspaper slid out from between its pages and fluttered to the floor. She picked it up automatically and froze. "Billionaire's wife dies in mansion fire," the headline read, dated 18 months earlier. Beneath it, a smaller article had been clipped and tucked behind the first, nearly hidden. A brief 3-paragraph report about a private nurse who had vanished the same night, never found, never mentioned again in any follow-up story. 2 disappearances, 1 official death, the exact same date. Amara sat on the library floor for a long time, the newspaper trembling in her hands, piecing together a horror she didn't yet have words for. Someone had covered up what really happened that night. And Yuna, silent, sleepless, standing at a locked door every evening at 8:15 for reasons no one would explain. Yuna might be the only person left alive who actually knew the truth. That same week, everything accelerated. Amara was in the hallway when she saw Jae-hoon receive a small package at the front door, hand-delivered by a courier who refused to give a name. She watched from a distance as he opened it in the foyer, his staff frozen around him like statues. Inside was a small pink shoe, a child's shoe, Yuna's shoe from before the fire. A note was tucked inside it. Amara couldn't read the Korean characters from where she stood, but she didn't need to. She watched Jae-hoon's face instead, watched the color drain out of it entirely, watched his hands begin to shake for the first time since she'd arrived in that house. He crushed the note in his fist and walked away without a word, but not before Amara caught a fragment of what was written, translated later by a sympathetic housekeeper who'd finally decided Amara had earned the truth. "She's finally remembering." For the first time, Amara saw real fear on the face of a man everyone else feared. And she understood, with a cold certainty settling into her bones, that this house was not haunted by a ghost. It was haunted by a secret that someone very powerful was determined to keep buried, no matter what it cost. Yuna's sleepwalking began that same week, as if her small body had absorbed her father's terror through the walls. Every night now, she rose from bed and walked, eyes half open, straight to the locked door in the east wing, the same door she'd stood before every evening for 18 months, only now she didn't stop after 3 minutes. Now she whispered something, over and over, words too soft and broken for Amara to understand. On the 4th night, during a storm that rattled the windows like something trying to get in, Amara followed her. She kept her distance, her heart hammering, watching Yuna's small white nightgown drift down the dark corridor like something out of a dream. The girl stopped in front of the locked nursery door, and then, impossibly, the door creaked open on its own, as if it had never truly been locked at all, only waiting for someone small enough, brave enough, broken enough to try. Amara followed her inside. The nursery was frozen in time, untouched for 18 months. A crib, a rocking chair, and on the wall a family portrait, except someone had taken a blade to the canvas and carefully, deliberately, cut the mother's face completely out of the frame. Behind the portrait, concealed in the wall, Amara found a seam in the wood that didn't belong. She pressed it without thinking, and a hidden panel slid aside to reveal an elevator, its interior lit by a single dim bulb waiting. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely press the button. But she thought of Yuna standing before this door every single evening for a year and a half, some buried part of her 7-year-old mind knowing exactly what lay beneath the floor of her own home, and Amara stepped inside. The elevator descended into a level of the mansion that shouldn't have existed. Sterile white corridors, medical equipment still plugged in, hospital beds once still made, sheets tucked with military precision, filing cabinets, and a bank of monitors connected to a hard drive labeled in careful handwriting with a single date, the date of the fire. Amara pressed play on the security footage. Her breath caught somewhere between her ribs. The video was grainy, time-stamped, undeniable. It showed a woman, Mrs. Choi, unmistakably alive, unmistakably terrified, being carried from a burning room by two men in dark clothing, not toward safety but toward a waiting vehicle at the rear of the property. She was not rescued. She was taken. And the man standing in the frame, directing the operation with cold, practiced authority, was not a stranger. It was Jae-hoon's own older brother. Amara's stomach turned over completely. The entire family had been living inside a lie so enormous it had swallowed a woman whole and left a 7-year-old too terrified to even speak her mother's name. That was the moment the alarm began blaring through the hidden level, red light bathing the white corridor, and Amara realized with dawning horror that someone had known she was down there the entire time. She grabbed Yuna's hand and ran. They didn't make it back to the elevator before the lights cut out entirely, plunging the mansion into total darkness, and Amara heard boots, many boots, pounding through the halls above them, and a man's voice, achingly familiar in its cruelty, shouting orders in Korean. They ran through service corridors Amara barely knew, Yuna's small hand locked in hers, until they burst through a side door into the storm and stumbled, breathless, into the one place Amara knew wouldn't be searched first, the hidden greenhouse behind the ivy. Which brings the story back to where it began. Amara crouched behind a wall of dead orchids, Yuna trembling against her chest, a flashlight beam sweeping closer through the shattered glass. And a man's voice, the brother's voice, calling out into the dark with terrible patience. "I know you're here. I only want the girl. She's the only one who remembers." Amara held Yuna tighter and prayed in 3 languages at once. The greenhouse door burst open. The brother stood silhouetted against the flashlight beams of his men, weapon raised, his eyes finding them instantly among the wreckage of dead flowers. "Give her to me," he said, "and you can walk out of here alive." Amara didn't move, couldn't. Her body had made the decision before her mind caught up. She would not hand this child to anyone, not for any amount of money, not for her own life. "No," she said, her voice cracking but steady. "You'll have to go through me." He raised the weapon higher, and for one suspended second, Amara believed with total clarity that she was going to die in a dead woman's garden, protecting a child who wasn't hers. And then Yuna spoke. For the first time in 18 months, the silence broke. "Mama is alive." 4 words, clear, loud, terrified. Not a whisper, not a fragment, a full, unmistakable sentence tearing through a house that had swallowed her voice for a year and a half. The brother froze. and behind him in the doorway appeared Jae-hoon flanked by security, having followed the chaos through the dark halls of his own home. He heard his daughter's voice for the first time since the fire, and something in his face collapsed entirely. The ice, the control, all of it, gone in an instant, replaced by a grief and fury so raw that even his brother took a step back. "You," Jae-hoon said, his voice breaking on the single word. "You took her from me. You took her mother, and you let my daughter live inside that silence for a year and a half, and you let me believe." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. What followed happened fast, security swarming the greenhouse. The brother disarmed and restrained before he could raise his weapon again. Yuna sobbing openly now, finally, blessedly loud, wrapped in her father's arms as he knelt in the ruined dirt among the dead orchids, and held her like he was afraid the world might try to take her again. The investigation that unfolded over the following weeks uncovered a truth even darker than the fire itself. Mrs. Choi had not simply witnessed something she shouldn't have. She had spent months, in secret, gathering evidence against the criminal empire her husband's family had built beneath their legitimate business. Laundered billions, silenced witnesses, corrupted officials. She had staged documents, hidden files, built a case strong enough to bring the entire operation down. She was silenced before she could finish. Kept alive in that hidden medical level for 18 months not out of mercy, but because only she knew where the final evidence was buried. And Yuna hadn't lost her voice to trauma alone. She had lost it to fear, real, specific fear, planted deliberately the night of the fire, when her uncle had knelt beside her in the smoke and whispered the only words a 4-year-old needed to hear to stay silent forever. "If you ever tell anyone your mother is alive, you'll lose her forever." She had carried that threat, alone, for a year and a half. A 4-year-old keeping the world's most dangerous secret to protect the mother she loved. The weeks that followed moved like something out of a fever dream. Jae-hoon's brother was arrested, along with a dozen others across the company's shadow network. Mrs. Choi was found alive, weak, but alive in a second facility 3 hours outside the city, and brought home to a daughter who ran to her so fast she nearly knocked her off her feet. The Choi group was gutted and rebuilt from the ground up, stripped of everything illegal, everything hidden, everything that had made people fear the family name instead of respect it. And through it all, Amara stayed. Not because the contract required it, because she couldn't imagine leaving before Yuna had truly, fully found her voice again. She got to watch it happen slowly over the following months. Yuna's first full sentence at breakfast. Her first laugh, sudden and surprised at something silly Amara said in badly accented Korean. Her first night sleeping through until morning, no sleepwalking, no locked doors calling her down dark hallways. When Amara's year was finally up, she stood in the foyer with her suitcase, the same one she'd carried from Ibadan, and found she couldn't quite make her feet move toward the door. Jae-hoon found her there. He was different now, too, not soft exactly, but no longer entirely made of ice. He held a small box in his hands and set it on the table between them, opening it to reveal the contract Amara had signed a year earlier, every page intact. He tore it in half. "You came here as an employee," he said quietly. "You leave as the woman who gave my daughter and my family a second chance we didn't deserve." Amara felt her throat tighten. "She gave me one too," she said. "I came here to save my family. I didn't expect to find another one." At the airport 2 days later, Amara was halfway to the gate when she heard footsteps running behind her, small and fast and unmistakable. She turned just in time to catch Yuna as the girl threw herself into her arms. "You were the first person who listened to me," Yuna said, her voice muffled against Amara's shoulder, still a little rough with disuse, still the most beautiful sound Amara had ever heard. "Even when I couldn't speak." Amara held her so tightly she thought her heart might crack open completely. "You were always speaking, sweetheart," she whispered. "I just had to learn how to hear you." As Amara finally turned toward the boarding gate, blinking back tears she didn't bother hiding anymore, Yuna pressed something small into her palm and stepped back into her father's arms. It was a paper crane, slightly crooked, folded by small, careful hands. Amara opened it gently on the plane somewhere over the ocean and found, drawn inside in careful crayon, 3 figures holding hands beneath a canopy of blooming cherry blossoms. She kept it for the rest of her life.